Welcome to Stoic Safari. Picture this, a crossroads, where ancient Roman Stoicism shakes hands with the enduring wisdom of African traditions. That's where we'll wander, through terrains shaped by centuries of thought and human resilience. Now, I get it. You might be asking, Stoicism and Ubuntu, Roman Empire philosophy and African oral traditions, what could they possibly share? And honestly, that's exactly where my journey started, over conversations with my partner Maryam. Conversations that sprang from curiosity, grew in complexity, and eventually transformed how we live and see the world. On one hand, we have Stoicism, a discipline born from the cosmopolitan chaos of the Roman Empire, teaching rational mastery over ourselves, showing us how to navigate whatever life throws our way. On the other hand, we have African traditions, rich, vibrant, emphasizing not just self-discipline, but the sacred interconnectedness of humanity. Two traditions, worlds apart, and yet somehow strikingly harmonious in their lessons. Both approaches ultimately ask the same fundamental questions. How do we thrive amidst hardship? What does it mean to live well, to create meaning in the uncertain spaces we inhabit? These philosophical gems may not have borrowed from each other, but they speak to timeless human universals in a way that's almost uncanny. And quite honestly, they've reshaped not just my mindset, but also my relationship, turning cultural differences into strengths. At its core, Stoic Safari sits in the space between worlds. The deliberate stillness of Stoicism meets the vibrant, communal pulse of African traditions. It's not about erasing each philosophy's edges or differences. No, it's in those differences, those sometimes rough and contradictory insights, that we find their brilliance. You see, where Stoic thinking emphasizes rational self-mastery, African traditions remind us that no one exists in isolation. Resilience isn't solitary, it's nurtured through connection, with others, with the earth, with collective wisdom. When we bring these two philosophies into conversation, something incredible happens. They challenge each other, yes, but they also expand each other into something richer, more complete. Think about the times we live in, fragmented, chaotic. Our problems, climate breakdowns, social upheaval, the relentless march of technology, they don't respect borders or individuals. Yet so often, the wisdom coming to us is packaged for lone consumption, as if you yourself hold every answer you'll ever need. This is where the dialogue we'll explore makes sense. These traditions offer us ways to confront uncertainty, yes, but they also call on us to recalibrate how we interact with a wider, shared humanity. When wisdom acknowledges both individuality and collective strength, well, we find the tools not just to survive, but to thrive, together. Stoic Safari isn't about skimming traditions, or speeding through for the sake of quick fixes. It's about grappling with philosophies that have resonated through time. It's about genuinely reflecting on what these traditions demand of us, and of each other. And this is key, it's about humility. Wisdom belongs to no one culture, no single voice. It emerges whenever human beings struggle with life's uncertainties, asking, what does it mean to live well, here and now? For me, this podcast has been shaped by hard conversations, moments of clarity, and of course plenty of mistakes along the way. Some of those conversations were joyful, others deeply challenging. But each, I think, carried this quiet, steady thread. The act of wrestling with these traditions made us stronger. Each episode of Stoic Safari will journey through a unique theme. Resilience through hardship, the exploration of virtue, grappling with impermanence, or learning to maintain perspective amidst chaos. But we'll do so grounded in practical wisdom. Wisdom we can live, not merely ponder. Both Stoicism and the rich traditions of African philosophy insist that words without action, ideas without applications, are hollow. So, we'll share honest stories, admit our failures, highlight those glimmers of meaning that guide us through the most complex moments of life. Whether you're navigating personal hardships or trying to make sense of a chaotic world, these traditions offer insights sharpened over generations. They remind us that humans have always struggled with uncertainty, strive for meaning, and sought resilience, not alone, but as communities. And starting this Monday morning, I invite you to join me regularly as we explore not just ideas, but their practical power right along with your morning coffee or your drive to work. This is where our paths meet. More than once, you'll hear me say this. We're not here to just absorb old truths like passive witnesses. Stoic Safari is your invitation to join this ongoing dialogue, to be part of an evolving patchwork of cultural knowledge. Philosophy isn't finished, it's alive. Somewhere in all its brilliance and imperfections, we, together, shape it further through reflection and lived practice. And as this conversation grows, I'm excited to hear from all of you too, your questions, your insights, your stories about how these traditions challenge and sustain you, and even, maybe, how they might help bridge divides in your own worlds. Wherever you're listening from today, that's the connection Stoic Safari stands for. That's the dialogue we believe in. And that, my friends, is our expedition. Not to arrive at final answers, but to remain open to the journey, humbled by the wisdom we've inherited and inspired by the paths we carve together. Thank you for being here, for lending your attention, your energy, and your curiosity.
So, when we talk about wisdom traditions, particularly Stoicism, we're often drawn to these incredibly timeless ideas. Logos, for instance, which refers to rational thought or universal reason, is one of the key principles, and philosophers like Marcus Aurelius or Seneca emphasized that human virtue, our capacity to act ethically and master our emotions, anchors us amid life's unpredictability. It's this almost, scientific approach to self-mastery that has intrigued people for centuries.
Right? And what I love about Stoic philosophy is how it's not afraid to acknowledge that life is, messy. It's like they just accepted that things are going to go off the rails, so why freak out? I mean, they literally built a philosophy around how to stay calm when chaos erupts. It's fascinating. And in a way, Stoicism becomes this handbook for navigating the chaos. But here's where we see surprising parallels with African wisdom traditions. Take Ubuntu, for instance. It centers around this idea that I am because we are. On the surface, it seems quite different from Stoicism, very relational, deeply rooted in communal identity. Yet there's a shared underlying wisdom about living with purpose and accountability in this vast web of connections.
I kind of love that I am because we are. That's just so beautiful, isn't it? And it's such a contrast to, individualism, which tend to dominate modern thinking. It's like Ubuntu insists that no matter what you're going through, there's a bigger picture, a network holding you. I feel like, personally, that's where I find my strength.
There's also Sankofa, another African principle that encourages us to return and retrieve, to look back and learn from the past as we move forward. It's an insight that strengthens the idea that resilience isn't something we just create individually. It's cultivated through shared identity, through knowing and honoring where we come from.
Kwame, that reminds me of when you explained the Kagotla system in Botswana to me. Do you remember? I remember you saying it's this communal gathering space where decisions aren't just made rationally, but through collective reasoning. That felt so alive to me. And surprisingly stoic, actually.
Of course. You see, in Botswana, the Kotla process is very much about reasoned discourse. everyone has a voice, and the aim is to reach shared understanding through rational debate. It's democracy in its purest, most human-centered form. Honestly, it feels like a living embodiment of Stoic ideals, recognizing the importance of community but grounding it in logic and shared responsibility.
Wait, so you're saying a philosophy born in ancient Rome shares ground with the way decisions are made in an African village? That's actually kinda poetic.
Yeah, and I think that's part of why these traditions resonate across ages and borders. They're addressing similar human challenges: how to live, how to endure, and how to grow.
What strikes me is how these principles see resilience as something larger than ourselves. Like, it's not just you toughing things out alone, it's about finding strength together. That's something I feel we, in modern life, have forgotten. And this interplay of self-mastery within a collective framework, that's where these traditions really shine, offering complementary insights into what it means to flourish as human beings.
This idea of resilience as more than just individual toughness, it's been lingering in my mind. Both Stoic and African wisdom seem to circle back to this shared understanding that resilience isn't just about me, but about us. It's about drawing strength from our connections, from the communities that shape and support us. Furthermore, I feel like in Ubuntu, that principle comes through so powerfully. You know, the idea that I am because we are. It's this inherent belief that our well-being is tied to the well-being of the people around us. And honestly, when I first really grasped it, something clicked for me. That's the beauty of Ubuntu. It offers a way of seeing the world where resilience isn't solo, it's shared. And the Stoics hint at this too. Marcus Aurelius often reflected on humanity as one body, interconnected, with each of us playing a part in a greater whole. It's almost prophetic how these philosophies align.
Yeah, it reminds me of something that happened during a hike back in Norway. I was trekking through this mountain trail and a storm rolled in, one of those sudden torrential storms where you're like, okay, this is happening. For a second, you feel completely alone, isolated in this chaos. But then I remember this so clearly, you start to notice how others on the trail respond, how people begin to start helping each other. To me, all that seemed like Ubuntu in action. And maybe, in a way, Stoic too, I would add.
That's such a powerful example, Maryam. It's exactly what we're talking about today on our very first episode. The idea that resilience comes from this shared human experience. And it's amazing how those small gestures can transform an overwhelming moment. I think Seneca would say that in helping others, we actually strengthen ourselves.
Completely in agreement there. And it's not just about the immediate actions, it's about realizing you're part of something bigger. Even when things feel chaotic, there's this steadying force in knowing you're connected to others. That's where the strength is supposed to come from, right?
That's right. And in both Stoicism and traditions like Ubuntu, there's this recognition that resilience isn't just about enduring. It's about flourishing, not despite challenges, but because of how we face the challenges together. And, it's so refreshing. So much of the modern narrative is about self-sufficiency, going it alone. But these traditions remind us that resilience isn't about isolation. It's about participation. It's all communal, that interplay between individual effort and collective strength, something truly profound, especially in our fragmented times.
Building on that sense of collective strength we were just exploring, Kwame, both Stoic and African philosophies also frame justice as a core principle. In Stoicism, justice is about aligning our actions with universal reason, contributing to harmony not just within ourselves but within the society at large. Similarly, African traditions see justice as deeply rooted in community. It's not just about fairness, but about nurturing connections and ensuring no one is left out. It ties back beautifully to this idea of resilience through togetherness. Would you agree? Right? And I also think that, that's such a powerful way to look at it. Justice not as a concept floating out there in theory, but something you work on with and for others. In both cases, there's this sense of accountability, isn't there? Not just to yourself, but to the people around you.
And what's interesting, Maryam, is that both perspectives offer unique strengths. The Stoics emphasize self-discipline in pursuing justice, while philosophies like Ubuntu remind us that justice is incomplete without community, a kind of balance between individual virtue and collective well-being.
Balance. That's the word for today. And by the way, it's not just limited to justice, is it? I think that it's also about character. Like Stoicism has this almost laser focus on cultivating virtue. It's as if that's the one thing nobody can ever take from you. And then you have Ubuntu, which says, yes, develop your character, but don't forget, your character shines brightest through your actions with others.
I know, right? It's like Ubuntu adds this external dimension, or rather communal extension. Your character can't really exist in isolation, if I were to frame it that way. And in practice, that kind of perspective acts as a built-in accountability system. You're not just building inner resilience, you're showing up for others in meaningful ways.
It makes so much sense though, right? Because if everyone's focused only on self-mastery, who's actually holding the community together? It's like the African perspective insists that resilience isn't just personal, it's communal. That just resonates so deeply for me.
And here's where the beauty of these traditions really comes alive, in their proverbs and maxims. Take, for instance, the famous Stoic line, "What stands in the way becomes the way." It's a call to embrace adversity as a path to growth. And then you've got the African equivalent, something like, "Smooth seas do not make skillful sailors." The parallels are fascinating, aren't they? They're both essentially saying, hardship is necessary. It shapes you and prepares you. Both traditions converge on this idea that resilience and growth come out of pressure. It's not about avoiding challenges, but facing them with grace and with community, as Ubuntu would add.
Would you say there exist some challenges and misconceptions, Kwame? Because to me, what's incredible is how these insights about resilience, for example, whether it's facing obstacles with grace or leaning on community, they all resonate so deeply even today. Here's the challenge. In trying to bring these philosophies into the modern world, we sometimes risk oversimplifying them, in my opinion. Like when someone reads a Marcus Aurelius quote and suddenly calls themselves a Stoic warrior, or shares a proverb and declares, "I embody Ubuntu."
Oh goodness, yes. It's like wearing a whole identity without truly understanding the culture or philosophy behind it. Reading two slogans doesn't make you some kind of sage, It's like, well, cultural fast food. And that brings us to the line between respectful adoption and something closer to cultural appropriation. Stoicism and African wisdom traditions aren't just accessories. If I were to be so blunt, they're ways of life shaped by specific histories and contexts. And what's frustrating is this idea that taking from these traditions is just harmless. I mean, there's a way to engage that's about learning and integration, but it takes effort. It takes humility.
Completely in agreement here. And if we're talking missteps, another misconception is this idea that Stoicism is all about going it alone, this radical individualism, while African philosophy is just groupthink. That kind of reductionism doesn't do justice to either tradition, it's just not accurate. Like, Ubuntu might emphasize community, yes, but it also values the individual's contribution. And Stoicism, it's not about isolating yourself. It's about mastering yourself to engage with the world responsibly.
Clearly, Ubuntu says, I am because we are. And Stoicism teaches self-mastery, not for its own sake, but to align with reason and community. They're two approaches with shared goals, responsibility, balance and harmony, among others.
And then there's ancestral veneration, which people sometimes dismiss as, just placating spirits. But it's so much more than that. It's a deeply ethical practice, a way of honoring those who came before us and learning from their lives.
Ancestral veneration, if I were to be succinct, especially in African traditions, isn't about mindless rituals. It's about grounding ourselves in a moral compass, about asking what our ancestors would think of our actions, not to mention our choices.
Yeah, it's reflective, right? It's not just about looking back, but using that wisdom to guide us moving forward. And honestly, isn't that what Stoic journaling is at its core? That daily reflection on how we live and the legacy we want to leave.
Spot on. Both practices, whether it's journaling or ancestral veneration, encourage us to reflect, to connect, and to strive for betterment. They remind us that our lives are part of a greater narrative, one that spans generations. And that's the thing, isn't it? These philosophies, whether it's the reflective practices or ethical grounding we just talked about, none was created in a vacuum. They were responses to the challenges of their time, which makes you wonder, how might they inform us now with the climate crisis, social injustice, and the breakdown of community structures pushing us to our limits?
Kwame, I feel like that's because they weren't just dealing with abstract ideas, These weren't ivory tower musings. I think they were survival guides. Life was unpredictable and tough, and they needed ways to navigate that, not just alone, but together. It's kind of timeless wisdom for a timeless problem.
Exactly. Timeless. And we're still dealing with unpredictability, just in a more global, interconnected way than they ever could have imagined. That's why practices like journaling, something the Stoics recommended, can be so powerful. It's about identifying what's within our control and what isn't. And once you've got that clarity, it's like an anchor. It grounds you.
I love how practical that is. And, it's not just journaling. African wisdom, for example, gives us those proverbs that you encounter and think, oh, that's lovely. But then it keeps unfolding layers of meaning, like the one about patience. How does it go? Rain does not fall on one roof alone.
Yes, rain does not fall on one roof alone. It reflects this communal perspective that challenges are shared and resilience must be collective. Pair that with a Stoic idea, like learning to endure adversity with grace, and you see this beautiful alignment. Together they remind us that hardship connects us as much as it tests us.
And that's such a powerful reframe, isn't it? It's not about running away from the hard stuff. It's about facing it together. And when you add Ubuntu to the mix, you realize it's not just enduring for yourself, but showing up for others. That just feels so human.
It really does. And that's the beauty of these traditions. They're offering us tools, but also a deep sense of responsibility. Whether it's reflective journaling or fostering community bonds, it's about actively shaping the world we want to see. And let's be real, that can feel daunting at times, right?
Oh, for sure. But it's also empowering, like we get to choose. We can decide how we respond, how we connect. And honestly, isn't that what it all comes down to? Choosing how to live well, even when life feels unpredictable and messy.
Exactly. These traditions, Stoicism with its focus on inner mastery, and Ubuntu with its celebration of interconnectedness, they're not quick fixes. They're practices, ongoing and evolving. And that's what makes them so relevant. They meet us where we are, but push us to be better for ourselves and for each other.
That's such a good reminder, because philosophy isn't about knowing all the answers, is it? It's about committing to the questions, to the process, and finding meaning through that, like the expedition we're on, really.
Absolutely. And that's where we'll leave you today. Stoic Safari is all about continuing that journey, exploring, reflecting, and growing together. We're so grateful to have you join us on this path.
Yes, thank you for being here with us. Take these ideas, let them sit with you, and see how they resonate in your life. Together, we'll keep navigating this terrain one step at a time.
We'll see you next time. Stay curious, stay grounded, and as always, keep exploring.